The media have been challenging Ben Carson on foreign policy since the Paris attacks, especially since he struggled several times to answer this question on Fox News Sunday.
But can you tell us who you would call first, sir, on the international scene?
I would call for all of the Arab states to be involved in this. I would call for all of our traditional allies to be involved in this.
That question about Carson assembling a coalition to go to war against ISIS. Then the New York Times published some damaging quotes from a Carson foreign policy advisor, former CIA operative Dewey Claridge, who said the candidate needs weekly conference calls, quote, so we can make him smart. Claridge added, nobody has been able to sit down with him and have him get one iota of intelligent information about the Middle East. A Carson spokesman said this to Business Insider about the 83-year-old Claridge. For the New York Times to take advantage of an elderly gentleman and use him as their foil in this story is an affront to good journalistic practices. Susan Frischio, was there something underhanded about the New York Times quoting Dewey Claridge, who is an informal foreign policy advisor to Ben Carson?
Well, it was strange, for one thing, to see one of his own advisors to talk about him that way to the New York Times. Everyone was like, what's this guy doing talking to the New York Times about his own client, the person he's trying to help? But I think what the New York Times article did was, even more so, was expose the atypical campaign that Ben Carson is running. He does not have a huge stable of foreign policy advisors like Jeb Bush does, or like President Obama did when he ran in 2008. He's got a real skeleton crew helping him run for president. And it is atypical, and so far the public is lapping it up. He's #2 in the polls. He's doing pretty well. But foreign policy is a problem for him. If you look at the polls now, it's number two up there.
Let me zero in on this question of, is it an affront to good journalistic practices the Carson campaign now contends? The New York Times says that Armstrong Williams, who is a friend of Dr. Carson, speaks for him on TV, but is not part of his campaign, referred the paper to Dewey Claridge, gave the cell phone number, and this was the only foreign policy advisor's name given to the newspaper. So is there anything wrong with then calling the guy up and quoting him, by the way, on the record?
No. In fact, they went to someone at another advisor, a general who's advising him as well, and talked to him and got a lot of positive response about Carson's foreign policy. I thought it was balanced, frankly, the whole article. But it was peculiar. It was peculiar that this advisor was willing to go on the record and talk to the New York Times. And I think it did expose a broader issue with how his campaign is being run.
Now, I would say that Carson has largely won his battle against news organizations that have been trying to poke holes in his life story, what he did when he was 14, the stabbing incident, and all of that. He told me last week that these organizations were deliberately trying to damage him. I don't agree. That's Ben Carson's view. So perhaps he sees these questions about his foreign policy knowledge also as being biased? Well,
it depends what the public thinks. That's what I would say. And right now, it's terrorism concerns #2 right now with voters. Actually, scrutiny is going to come whether he likes it or not, and his answers are going to be really important, and it's going to be up to really the public.
But my question to you is, particularly in the wake of the Paris attacks, is the media scrutiny of Dr. Carson and what he knows and what he would do on the foreign policy front, is that unfair?
Only if you compare it to the way they look at everybody else. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. Part of the problem in the Middle East right now rests on her shoulders based on what she did in Libya and the destabilization of Libya. I don't see the New York Times unleashing their stable of reporters to really look at her job as Secretary of State and what happened in Libya and how it partially led to the advancement of ISIS right now. Well, where is that reporting?
The Times and others have looked into Hillary and Benghazi, but as far as ISIS, you have a great point. Susan, thanks very much. By the way, Carson dropping 5 points in a Fox News poll out just a couple of hours ago. 18%, that's second place. Donald Trump, 28%, he's up a little bit. And Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio tied for third at 14%. Ahead on Media Buzz, the National Enquirer's editor on how he broke the Charlie Sheen HIV story, and was the actor telling the truth on the Today Show. But first, how are the Paris attacks affecting coverage of the candidates? Our media microscope is up next.